Kayla Henry is wielding the power of the pen through pure poetry. She is the author of the poem Parrhesia, which went viral last year for pointing fearlessly to the corrupt power and top-down control around the pandemic. Her crusade for truth elevates messages of medical freedom, the desire for clear language in media, and an eagerness to understand governance in the Western world. Kayla is a brilliant, budding Canadian artist. In our interview, we read parts of her new book, Rhymes to Rhetoric, and map out her hero's journey, reflecting on her call to adventure to step out as an individual and to catch flight through creative freedom. I'm Sienna Mae Heath, and this is Leaving the Left for Liberty.
We can still erase this if we face it, us against the faces that convince us drugs will solve our problems while they profit from our consumption. Stop listening to stars and politicians and begin using intuition, discerning fact from fiction. Stop paying into our addiction of listening to a system that's turning us to victims of our lack of wisdom. If you don't see it now, it's okay to be confused. But don't throw rocks at those who do. Take a step back and you'll see who is piloting this ruse. A bunch of individuals profiting from your residuals, putting our money into propaganda and riot police instead of into our failing healthcare system. But I can tell you, the people who came out independent were the ones who were observant. I had to unlearn to become present, and I'm still working on it. But I make decisions for myself. This isn't about health. If it were, they'd tell us, get your vitamins, go for walks whenever you can. Do sports, eat well, have interactions, real human connections, raise your kids with healthy immune systems. Instead, they punish insurrections that fight for freedom from the infectious disease that is control. They swallow us whole, keep us indoors, special treatment for big box stores, give us fines when we're unsure what martial law is in place today. Give us checks to stay on our good side, keep us lost and afraid because we can't afford a rising mortgage or rent because we lost our pay. It was never going to be just a few days.
Hi.
Hi, Kayla. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Oh, I'm just thrilled to have you on the show. I've been watching and reading your poetry nonstop.
Fantastic. I'm really happy to be here.
Yeah. So, as I mentioned in our messages, since we're both writers, I think we can really play around with the kind of underlying theme of the series, which is the hero's journey, and map it out, rather specifically, and kind of make it a creative exercise and a world building exercise, and then
Yeah.
mix in some of your poetry too.
Oh, you got the book? Yes.
The book, yeah.
Fantastic. Oh no, I think that would be super interesting. I did a little bit of research this morning on the whole hero's journey thing, which I have come across before, but it's definitely going to be kind of an interesting thing to map out. And yeah, definitely a nice creative kind of exercise, as you said.
Yeah, so I've noticed that quite a few individuals who are rising above the modern day witch hunt, as I like to call it, many of us are creatives.
Yeah.
We're writers, poets like yourself,
Mhm.
painters, musicians, comedians, and I think there's something to that. So I'm curious, as an artist, a YouTuber, and just all around beautiful person, a Canadian as well, and what motivates you to be brave?
Oh, wow. I mean, I think it's just the need to be the best version of myself. I think deep down we all want to be that, but we have a lot of things that kind of that we hold back. We censor ourselves from being the best version of our truest selves, and that actually exhausts the creative spirit, the ego, and everything. So I think at a certain point it just bubbles up and you need to do something about it.
Yeah, it's inevitable. And I've been wondering too about like whether every person on the planet has this capacity within themselves to step out as an individual and be brave, whether
Mhm.
through their art or
another way that they're using their voice. So what do you think is inside of you and perhaps inside of any person that motivates you to step out as an individual?
I honestly believe that we all have an artist inside of us. And some of us, I guess, are more in touch with that inner artist and have that absolute pleasure of being in touch with that side of themselves. I've been like that my whole life. I've always been an artist involved in like music. I studied theater, and I've always been writing, whether it's poems or song lyrics. So it's always been inside me. I've always had that creative flow. But honestly, in the last couple years, as I'm navigating this new idea of the world, my inspiration has skyrocketed.
Hmm.
It's kind of like opened the it's opened Pandora's box of inspiration, and I'm just like, I'm riding that wave.
That's awesome. Yeah. And it seems to me that you're organically following the steps of the hero's journey. And like, as you know, there is that old world, new world paradigm
Mhm.
within the hero's journey. So there's leaving a familiar world behind.
Yeah.
There's learning to navigate an unfamiliar world. Yes. And
Yeah.
yeah, relatable. And returning home to the self transformed. So yeah, like as I've mentioned, since we're both writers and lovers of story, I thought we could map out your hero's journey. But first,
Yeah.
let's establish your character. Who is Kayla
Right.
Henry?
Oh, wow, that's such a loaded question. Honestly, I'm still figuring that out. Um to me, I know I'm deep down, I'm an artist, and I think I'm a lot more in touch with nature than I thought I was, I guess, many years ago. Um, Deep down as well, I am not a mother yet, but I think I have that motherly instinct. So, in a way, I am a creator, I am a mother, I am uh, on all my bios I say lover of life, and that's what it is. That's true. I love life, and that's why I'm here to make the most of it. And it's pretty filled with ups and downs, but it's so worth it, because that's it. I love life so much.
Wow, I mean that's beautiful, and it's quite almost like an accomplishment or just something to strive for in these times, because like there are plenty of things to keep us up at night, especially like those of us who have gone down some rabbit
Yeah.
holes, you know.
Yeah.
So let's map out the hero's journey. So first, we in many like epic tales, we experience the hero in a sort of status quo.
Hmm.
Then there's the call to adventure. Then there's meeting a human guide or supernatural aid,
Right.
crossing a threshold, road of trials, approaching a cave, an ordeal, a reward, magic flight, return, resurrection, and resolution. So let's start with the status quo. What was your life like at the beginning of 2020, and how would you describe the status quo like in the Western world before the pandemic?
Right. So a few years ago, I'm an actress. So I'm definitely not a big famous actress or anything, but definitely a creative at heart, as we already established. And I was very much into that zone of I guess the Hollywood mindset, kind of trying your best to be the perfect image of what I guess the left side wants people to look like, and wants people to be like, and trying to be a mentor for something you're not meant to do, almost. So I was very much in a space where I was trying my best to be very creative, but there was a mental block, I suppose, because I knew deep down it wasn't exactly who I was, and I was having a very hard time fitting into that particular artistic community where everyone's walking on eggshells and not really letting their true opinions fly.
Mm.
That's where my status quo was this is it's normal to try desperately to fit in, and your main goal is to get a role and be accepted, and so you're just kind of painting yourself with many different faces and hoping that catches on, and you paint yourself with every face except for your own.
Oh gosh, yeah, that's a profound way of putting it. There's this culture of cowardice too, and
Mm-hmm.
fakery that really, I think it really rubs like creatives that are like coming into their power, just like rubs us the wrong way because we're like, we
Yeah.
just want real talk, you know, real art.
Yeah.
And then there was this breaking point, I think for a lot of us at the beginning of the pandemic, or maybe like a few months in. What was your first breaking point in spring or summer of 2020?
Oh, it's hard to pinpoint. I think even before the pandemic lockdown hit, I was already starting to question my reality. I think the the big tipping point for me where I started thinking, hey, something is not right, was the first time I did my taxes by myself. And I was looking at this and I was wondering, like, why the heck did no one prepare me to do something that has so much weight behind it and so much like importance? And if you don't do it right, you get audited. And then nobody ever told me how to do my taxes. Nobody ever taught me in my lovely public school how to navigate the real world. And there were a whole bunch of little like Easter eggs of confusion that I thought, like, why did no one talk to me about this when I was young and like developing my brain?
Hmm. So that was that like, I guess, so tax time, that was like right as the pandemic started, actually.
It's
Yeah.
like even a couple years before, like let's say 2 years before, when I did my taxes by myself for the first time, because my
Okay.
mother used to do them for me, and so yeah, that was even before the pandemic hit. And then when it came to the pandemic, like I'm a naturally curious human being, so I'll fall down these rabbit holes because I'm just curious, and it's not like I'm trying to be a conspiracy theorist or whatever. I'm just so curious, so I'm going on government websites looking at all the stats, and I'm like, things aren't adding up. Like, if I'm looking at the calculations that I'm making, the survival rates versus the death rates, I'm like, why is everything getting locked down if it's not that bad?
Hmm.
So that's where I sat. I just, there was something that wasn't clicking right, and I couldn't find the logic in all these health measures.
Hmm. Yeah. And what were you uncertain about? What else were
uh
you uncertain about?
Yeah, what was I uncertain about? I was uncertain about, well, obviously everyone's thinking about their own health. And when the pandemic hit, I I was I was scared. I was scared. I thought this was all very real, and I thought I needed to sanitize my groceries. I did that for several weeks
Hmm.
until I'm like, well, I don't know if this makes very much sense. So I was doing research because I wanted to know why I was so scared and why it was so important for other people to tell me that I should be scared, because nobody wants to be scared, and I didn't like being scared. So I needed to find a way out of it. I
Yeah.
needed to calm myself down.
Were you asking questions like more publicly or of your peers? And like, if so, how were you treated?
At that point, no. I was too scared to really talk to anyone about it. And there was this strange air in the world where people didn't want to see each other anyways. So I was, I guess, communicating with my fiance at home and having discussions like that with him and kind of bouncing ideas off one another. But it was very much, I kind of put on my horse blinders and dove into any kind of research that I could do. I was doing it very much on my own, solo.
Yeah. Well, and moving forward, you wrote the poem that, for lack of better words, went viral, called Parrhesia. Am I saying that right?
Yeah, Parrhesia.
Parrhesia. So, which means free, frank, and fearless speech. And I learned that in ancient Greek, speaking with Parrhesia meant saying everything or speaking one's mind. And I love how, actually, I prefer your definition. I love how you define it in your poem called All Speak.
Yeah.
Freely, candidly, an openness to speak your mind, an apology of some kind for being blunt and staying bold. So would you like to give us a taste of Parrhesia and read a little bit of it?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
I just it's definitely a pretty long poem, so I'll just read a chunk of it here. This is kind of midway through the poem. We're right where they want us, distanced and thoughtless, avoiding each other so we can't discuss what's wrong with this picture. Instead, we write our feelings, caps lock on with words vomiting out of our thumbs without knowledge of real arguing. Why can't ideas be shared without ruining friendships and careers just because someone got offended, never learned emotional intelligence? Your feelings have no relevance in the crusade for truth. That's a chunk.
Yeah.
People seem to be resonating with the feelings have no relevance in the crusade for truth line. And it's one of my favorite lines in the poem as well.
Yeah. And you read another one of my favorite parts, which is about relationships. And I think when I first shared it, I shared that line. Why? Could you repeat it again so I don't butcher it?
About why can't ideas be shared without ruining friendships and careers?
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's such a almost like simple question, like why how have we gotten to this point? And in writing that, you also spoke to the corrupt powers, or about the corrupt powers that be, and how divisive they can be, and how easy it is for people to fall into the fear programming. So as you were releasing this, did you perhaps like identify a villain of sorts, kind of like the in the hero's journey there's always a villain? So what were you working against?
Yeah, so when I was writing the poem, I was pretty angry. And so the whole idea of using the they word kind of came out, and they can really represent a lot of different groups. So people who are reading it might think, well, they is this or they is that. They, in a lot of the lines in the poem, would be the government and anyone who's involved in the healthcare system. Now looking back, I wrote this poem in May. I think back to it, and my concern really is personal autonomy, and it's not about who they is and the they versus us. It's really about what's going on in here and in here. So yeah, they at that point for me was the government and the people who were disagreeing with things that I was saying and the questions I was asking.
Yeah,
that was the villain at that point.
Yeah, and when I was just reflecting on what I knew of you so far, I was thinking that it would be something like pure poetry versus corrupt power. Yeah, because there is still like a purity to this poem. While it really like it speaks to the very like 3D realities of our world, it's still, I think it's like in the rhyming and in the rhythm too, like that's what really makes it so exceptional. And it's just so to the point, like this is who you are unapologetically. And I felt like in a way you were doing it for us, like for those of us who were sick and tired of feeling alone in all of this, like just to give us a voice to the voiceless.
Right. Honestly, when I wrote the poem, it was for myself, because I had been going down these rabbit holes and just overwhelming my brain with new information and this new understanding of how the world runs and how corruption is affecting us so deeply, and it's taking away our humanity. And I had been consuming so much information that it was really getting stuck like right here. And at one point I sat down and all the words just vomited out of my thumbs. And I wrote it in maybe half an hour, because it all spilled out like some sort of divine intervention. It just waterfalled out of me like that. And I guess the reason I posted it and shared it online was more of to free myself in a way. I just wanted to say, okay, people who know me or kind of know me, this is what I think. Have at it, do what you will with it. I did not expect it to travel as far as it did and still is traveling. It was more of a self-healing process about saying, hey, I have an alternate opinion, and it feels good to tell someone that I'm not having any of it.
Yeah, that does feel good. I've had those moments
Yeah.
in my writing journey too, where I'm just like, this is who I am. Please don't hunt me down. Thanks.
Yeah, exactly.
And there's beauty in that vulnerability too. Did you hesitate at all to release the full poem?
Oh yeah. I wrote the poem, I memorized it, I filmed it, and then the final edit stayed on my computer for like a week or two because I didn't want to release it. I had all sorts of mental theater going on, saying like, well, people are gonna think you're a Looney Tune, or just all sorts of negative thoughts I was having about how people were gonna react to it. And it was more the people in my closer circles that I was concerned about.
Yeah.
But at a certain point, I'm like, well, I wrote it. There's a reason I wrote it, so just share it, and whatever happens, happens. I'm trying to get used to this idea that a lot of the fears that you have aren't actually going to manifest in reality. So don't live your life based on the fears you have. Live it based on your art and your love and your desires, and just let it run free. Let your art run free.
Yeah. Yeah. And when you did this, it reminded me of the throat chakra. And how, are you familiar with the chakras?
Not super familiar, but please like educate me.
I mean, I'm not super familiar either, but I have been told about the blocking of the throat chakra, and like how many artists and others who like use their voice can feel that, especially in these times, because of the self-censorship and the actual censorship from the top down.
Yeah.
And in release it, I feel like, I'm sorry, I just love your poetry, so I just want to read one more if that's okay, because
Yeah, go ahead.
this moment when you released it, I felt like this short poem called Decide kind of perhaps like summed up how you were feeling.
Yep, 100%.
Yeah. So you wrote, I could live a sheltered life or expose myself to strife. But if I take the latter, let it be for what is right.
Yep. That's exactly it. It's you can't just hold everything back for the rest of your life, because eventually it's gonna come back and bite you spiritually. It's gonna wear you down.
Yeah. Yeah. And that the next stage of the hero's journey,
Yeah. Moving
actually kind of
on.
like transitions perfectly. It's like, because you were talking about like a spiritual crisis perhaps. So sometimes in the hero's journey there's a human guide, and other times it's more of like a supernatural aid. So
Mhm.
who or what helped you during this time of releasing Parrhesia?
Well, I go back to my fiance Vince. Like, he's uh, the most intelligent person I have ever had the pleasure of knowing. And I read Parrhesia to him. He's the first person I read it to. I read it out loud. I sat on the couch with him and I said, "Hey, I wrote a poem. Can you listen to it? And I think it's really good, but tell me what you think." So I read it to him and he said, "That deserves to be heard."
Yeah. Yeah. And I think a lot of these concerns are spiritual too. Like there's this clinging to the material reality, which I see, especially around the issue of vaccine mandates. There's like this desire to have one's physical reality meet another's physical reality to like prove one's love or goodness, which I feel is really more
Mhm.
materialism. That's rooted in materialism. And then there's also
Yeah.
this craving for a spiritual reality to really release those shackles, to see beyond even left and right and create a new world.
Mhm.
Um, do you have any spiritual beliefs that shape your perception of what's happening?
Um, well, I I'm not a very religious person, but there are a lot of aspects of, I guess, Christianity that make sense to me. And one of the aspects is the aspect of forgiveness. And it helps shape me as an individual in thinking, well, anyone who does wrong is not doing it because they are innately evil. It is because they are misguided, is because of perhaps prior indoctrination. It is because they are doing what they think is right. And if we keep yelling at each other and pointing fingers at each other, we're just digging ourselves into deeper holes of separation, and just this desire to be the one who is right is not healthy. And forgiveness is about understanding where people are coming from and understanding that we all make mistakes and we're all doing what we think is best for ourselves and for our families. And so it helps take down that anger and that desire to um, hate and point fingers at people who are really just trying to do their best. It's a really difficult world to navigate, and I've been on so many different ends of the spectrum of beliefs, so I can understand where people are coming from. And I know that fire hosing people and pointing fingers and calling people out on their BS or their bad, corrupt beliefs is not helpful. It doesn't help anyone. It strips people's egos, and that makes people shut down even more.
Hmm. Yeah. So have you been kind of dabbling in like different parts of the political spectrum during your life so far?
I suppose I've always been kind of politically homeless in a sense. When I first was of age to vote, I didn't really understand politics very much, but I was told by the people around me, well, you can vote, so vote, like exercise your right to vote. And that didn't sit well with me. I'm like, well, why would I exercise my right to vote if I don't even know what that means? Like, if I don't even know why I'm voting and who I'm voting for and what the purpose is and how it's going to change my life. So the first time I voted, I voted for Trudeau. Ooh.
You shudder a little bit when you say that. What?
Yeah, I'm like, why did I do that? Because I had no idea what I was doing and why I was doing it. I was just told by the people around me that that was the thing to do. If you have the right to vote, you exercise it, whether you know anything about politics or not.
Hmm. And there are some charming figures. I would say Trudeau might be one of them. Some would consider him charming, who, like, perhaps they're doing what they think is right, but also when they're in those positions of power, they can exercise those top-down approaches to say, okay, this is what I think is right for my family, and also it's what I think is right for your family. And that's where it goes too far for me. And that's where I've sort of like, when I say like leaving the left for liberty, I don't mean like leaving the left for the right, but I do find, at least in the US, I'm not sure if it's the same as in Canada, but the left is more of like a top down. And then like other areas of the ideological spectrum, like libertarians, for example, like they believe in limited government and more of like a grassroots approach. And that was like the tension for me, maybe a year ago, or actually, yeah, it was just about a year ago, because I came out as an undecided voter in the 2020 election. And that was interesting. It was interesting for other people. For me, it was like, I don't know. I just don't know who to vote for. I don't like the choices.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's something about well, the way I understand it is I don't think government should have as much control over people's individual lives, to go as far as saying what you should be teaching your children and at what time and to what extent. So I mean, it's complicated because in many ways systems of government can help. We've got a planet full of so many people, and maybe without some sort of direction it could be pandemonium, but how do we really know? But there's way too much control over what people do. Like in a small town, there are regulations about how your house has to look and how you take care of your lawn. And it's like, what's the point there? How is that helping people? People can make a lot of their own decisions. And what color you paint your house, that's maybe a little bit of a stretch, right?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of like small aspects that we can make these choices for ourselves. This is not what government was meant to do, but it's become this point of just absolute control of what every individual does every waking hour of their day. And that's not it. That's not how we grow as people. We're not all robots.
No, we're not. And I think collectively, I use that term really loosely, but like I do think collectively, at least in the Western world, from what I'm observing, we're crossing this threshold. I think a lot of us are crossing this threshold of saying, enough is enough. You don't get to tell me how I paint my house. You don't get to tell me what my kids should be taught. You don't get to tell me X, Y, and Z. And for me, it's like it runs deeper than just like kind of like this material stuff. It's more like, you don't get to tell me what it means to be a good person. I know what's in my heart. And
Right.
now with the mandates too, I feel like it's now it's this infiltration of the body, which is like, for me, I think it's a sacred vessel. And it's like the ultimate source of autonomy. It's almost like the last place. Like if they come for your spirit, they come for your mind, but then like your body too. It's just, it feels I'm really concerned to say the least.
Yeah. It's all we have left.
Mm-hmm.
This is the only, like you said, it's the vessel. This is like the only thing we now have just full control over. And even then, they're pushing to have control over that too. And that's terrifying to me, because like I should be able to decide what I want to do with my body. That is not up to a person I've never met in my life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And a person who neither likes you nor understands you. I'm sort of just paraphrasing a part of the Scarlet Letter there. Like it's this feeling of like, how can this be for the common good when these people don't seem to like or understand me? Like, and how can it be for the common good when so much information and so many stories, like for those who have been injured, just get shoved under the rug or deemed not as valuable or not as precious. And like from the perspective of a writer, and I feel like maybe you can relate to this too. I'm not a scientist. I am not a politician. I don't want to be either of those things, but I do know stories, and I do know that humans are made of stories. And when we get to a place where some stories are deemed more valuable than others, I think, I mean, I said it over a year ago, but I was right, that leads to a place of dehumanization, and dehumanization leads to violence. And historically, it's just a very dangerous place to be. So I feel like I've crossed the threshold of like really wrestling with my own truth, not wrestling, but like, appreciating the worthiness of my own truth, and then also like looking to people like you. And I hesitate to like even call us heroes, or you a hero, because I feel like some people are like, well, I don't want to be called a hero, but there is this contrast I feel between like cowardice and bravery. And I don't know, like, do you think that it's fair sometimes to call a whistleblower or a dissident or an especially brave artist as a hero?
I mean, everyone can have their different view of different individuals. Everyone might have a different idea of who their hero is. For me, I don't I don't see myself as anyone's hero. I hope one day I can be my own hero. But I'm not out searching to be anyone's hero but my own. Really, it's a personal agency thing. If you're always looking outward for someone to help you and fix your problems, then you will always, I don't know, let me see if I can phrase this better, but it's the only person you can change is yourself. So if you're looking to a hero, perhaps a hero inspires you, inspires you or inspires change within you. But the only person who has the power to change yourself is yourself. So we all have to be our own heroes at some point.
Yeah. I think like if I ever do call someone a hero, it's because they inspire me to be the hero of my own life, because they're becoming the heroes of their own life. Like it's really more of like individualism. And I'm so disappointed that individuality has gotten such a bad reputation among like the mobs, many of like the mobs of our time. It's like as if like individualism bad, collectivism good, and you can't have one without the other. Like in fact, you need individuals who are the heroes of their own stories to then make up a stronger collective. And I feel like You get, yeah, like, and I
Yeah.
feel like as a writer, I've been really taken aback by the hijacking of language, by like the demonizing of one word and like the idol worship of another word or concept. Has this
Yeah.
also been part of your road of trials?
Oh, for sure. I mean, being part of once again, like the acting community, the theater community, it's particularly in that spectrum of people. I don't like to group people together, but we all choose to be part of different communities at some point. And I was so uncomfortable. I mean, when you feel like you have to walk on eggshells every time you're with people that you want to like and want to be accepted by and want to create beautiful things with, like all I wanted to do was create art with other people. And when there's this self-censorship and this blockade where you have to think about every word that comes out of your mouth, like how are you supposed to be like comfortable? How are you really reaching potential if you can't even have a conversation without thinking, uh-oh, what if I say this? It just totally shuts you off. It shuts the valve of inspiration for me, that's for sure.
Yeah, and I find it really concerning that within especially the theater community and as well as like a lot of musicians too, like I think
Mhm.
there are like actors and musicians who are stepping out,
Yeah.
and like I see those people as kind of like the kind of people I want to be around and talk to.
Yeah.
But
They
they're,
sound fun.
yeah, and like while I really want to shy away from like lumping people together because that's what they do to us sometimes. Um, it's hard not to, because it seems they formed sort of a mob. And um, I'm curious, within the theater community, even before 2020 or perhaps like more recently, what is something that is just a big no-no that you can't, or they don't want you to talk about?
Oh, the big spectrum of race is a big no-no. Um, so a lot of feminist culture as well, and the new age feminism, I
Mm.
mean. Um, and I don't know, anything right now that's taboo in in the world, it applies to the theater community, I mean, and the acting community, Hollywood, all that stuff. Everything you hear on the news, it applies to what I've seen, I've experienced, about equal equal outcome versus equal opportunity. And um yeah, I mean, all the no topics that you can think of are very, very prominent
Mm.
in that particular community.
Have you tried to bring up any of these topics with your theater friends?
I did a couple years ago. I was on set. I was filming a show, and I brought up I just hinted at something that doesn't go against the current feminism narrative, and I felt the tension rise suddenly, and I thought, okay, I'm in the workplace, okay? I am here to work. I'm not here to chat politics with anyone and chat my beliefs. So I'm going to shut my mouth and I'm going to go on with my day because I've got other work to do. But after that one incident, I'm like, gosh, I got to be careful with the crowds I'm in and what I say. And the more and more I saw that happening within myself, the more I distanced myself from that particular community because I couldn't speak my mind. What's the point? Like, if you're around friends, are they really your friends if you can't speak openly to them?
Yeah, and particularly like in an artistic environment, you need to have that freedom and you need to have like
Mhm.
that trust.
Yeah.
And it's a shame that like so many creative communities are experiencing this censorship within, because art has a way approaching the darkest corners of the psyche and of the world and really making beauty and meaning of them. But to do that, you need to feel free. Like that's why we have a thing called creative freedom.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, so how can your art contribute to the needs of the time as you see them?
Well, for me, just art in general is a lot more accessible to the world. Right now, there's so much going on, and people are so stressed about what's happening tomorrow and the next day, and everyone's latched onto their phones and their TV screens. And there are so many people on every end of the belief spectrum that are desperately pushing facts and numbers and history lessons. And it gets exhausting. Nobody likes to be, I've used the word before, nobody likes to be fire hosed. It's very overwhelming, especially if you've never thought about any of these topics before. And art, to me, is the best way to put things lightly. And it's the best way to encourage thought without forcing people into a conversation that they're not ready to have. So that's what I'm doing with my poetry. All I want to do is present ideas, present thoughts, present opinions, and kind of let people do with it what they will, because like I said before, like, you can't change anyone's mind. They can only change their own mind. You can't bring a horse to water. You can bring a horse to water, but you can't make it drink, type of thing. So I'm herding the horses to the pond and letting them do what they want.
Yeah.
That's how my poetry is going to be. That's how it's gonna help, hopefully. We'll see.
I think so. I mean, you can't make them drink. I think that's what you were getting at.
Yeah.
And the power of the pen is a part of art. Like I think sometimes like visual artists kind of forget that like writers are artists too. And I've noticed like even in the phrasing, like we say like artists and writers, and I'm like, why don't we just say artists? Because we're all artists.
Oh, do you know what? I never really came across that bias, honestly, in my life. I guess maybe because I'm around all sorts of different types of artists, I see everyone as an artist. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't come across it all the time, actually, because my parents are artists. Like, they're artists behind me. So like we always referred to ourselves as a family of, we still refer to ourselves as a family of artists. And my mom, while a visual artist, also is a really talented writer. So from a very early age, she instilled in me what is the power of the pen and how that can be your sword. You don't need to fight or raise your voice when your words already hold meaning. Which is a lesson I'm like still learning. Yes. So how does the power of the pen prepare you and perhaps others for challenges ahead?
Right. I mean, for me, the way I'm writing is a way where I write down my thoughts and I kind of let everything flow out, and then I can reflect on it myself. So it helps me understand my own thoughts. It helps me think critically about what my opinions are. So whenever I write a poem, I try not to censor myself in any way. I'm getting pretty good at that. But I let everything flow, and it's a way of processing my beliefs and questioning them as well. So that's how my pen is powerful in my life.
This reminds me of one of your poems.
Uh-oh.
Bemuse. Wait, I'm sorry, did we read this one? Or have I just read it many times myself?
You've probably read it many times.
Okay. But I don't think we read it today. So, okay. No. This is called Bemuse, and I just kind of want to like reflect on it with you. Should you retreat to ideology? Right and wrong do not bend to identity. No matter a given social status or the way you hold your head, if your pride rejects what is, your moral compass starves instead.
It's very interesting to hear someone else read your work. It's like it's hitting different.
Really?
Yeah. But like you're reading it exactly the way I have it in my head. So I'm glad it's translating to that kind of rhythm anyway, for you anyways. But yeah, I mean, I think in a way it speaks for itself. You need to follow your moral compass, and the stronger that is, the more clarity you will have in all the decisions you make. You don't need to identify with a certain group or a certain political side. It's what your moral compass is telling you that is the be all end all.
Yeah. And while I think reason and science definitely have a place in our society,
Yes.
I think there needs to be a balance. And I think that that was what I was getting out of the poem too, is like, especially that last line about the moral compass. If a certain ideology or approach is steering a big group of people to shame, shun, and dehumanize another group of people, I really have a hard time trusting that ideology itself.
Right.
So what are you seeing in terms of shaming, shunning, and dehumanizing people who are more alternative in their choices?
Well, I think it's so interesting because when it comes to groups or individuals who are speaking out against the mainstream narrative, right now that's not the right thing to do. But not so long ago, the whole punk rock movement, all that stuff was anti-establishment, and it was cool, man. It was cool to be against the system, whatever you wanted to call it. And now it's cool to be, I don't know what it is, but it's cool to be compliant and complacent. Since when was that cool?
Like, what is this upside down world? I'm like, where have all the
Yeah.
hippies gone?
Like, where are my rebels?
Yeah. Yeah, where have all the hippies gone?
Mhm.
Would you say that, like, what we're talking about in terms of like feeling ostracized from perhaps your theater community, and like feeling like there's this wave of dehumanizing people like us who are more alternative, would you say that like that's the main ordeal you're facing, or is it something else?
I think the main ordeal I'm facing right now is I'm still getting used to this new view of the world. So it's pretty much me versus my own indoctrination right now. And I'm like just beating it down with a stick and trying to figure out, like, I'm trying to catch myself every time I do something that I was convinced to do by, let's say, the public school system or just the society around me. That's my battle, is really trying not to fall into these habits that have been so ingrained within me, and trying to dig a little deeper to critical thinking and my moral compass.
Yeah.
That's my challenge.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it always comes back to the self. And
Yeah.
I don't think that that's selfish, you know, and even that word is like, what does that word even mean? Because turning inward is, in a way, it can be very selfless, because you can say, okay, all that stuff is going on outside me. Like, I mean, it seems like a lot of people will like want people like me dead right now. It's kind of a weird vibe, but but like if I can at least like see a sliver of myself in that person or in that group and say, I'm not immune to the human condition, and I can be the hero of my own life and change whatever it is within me that perhaps is like a bit of a mirror image
Yeah.
of what I'm seeing outside of myself, like then I can take my power back.
Yeah. And we all have potential, right? And the most selfless act, I would think, is to live your life trying to reach that potential. Because the more of us who are striving to reach our potential there are, the less problems there are in the world. We can spend our entire lives trying to fix the outside world and never once look inward. And that's where a lot of the problems are, really. So I think it's very selfless to try your best to be the most useful, most useful version of yourself, the most, yeah, just reach your potential. Potential is the best word I can think of for that.
Yeah. And like that story, like that journey of kind of like rediscovering who you truly are. I'm thinking of the Lion King briefly, like remember who you are, like that is in like countless, I mean, not just the Lion King, but like countless stories,
Yeah.
really epic tales, movies, books. And that, like, another stage of the hero's journey is called magic flight, or some call it that, magic flight. So when seeking an escape or some magic in the mundane, I feel like art can help us catch flight or magic flight.
Yeah.
What comes up for you when you hear the words magic flight, and what does creative freedom within that flight mean for you?
Wow. That's it's an interesting question. I mean, for me, as soon as I started just letting my creative juices flow, like as soon as Parrhesia was out of my system, I feel like that was the blockage and the floodgates open. So I felt like inspiration wise, like I think I still am. I'm flying. I'm just, because I don't have that wall of self-censorship anymore in my art. Maybe I still have it in my everyday life communicating with people around me, but in my art I have so much freedom, and it's magic. It's beautiful, because I've never felt more in touch with myself, because I've never known how to not censor myself. And to be able to do that through poetry is such a wonderful experience. And when I write a poem and I read it back to myself, I'm like, wow, that felt great to let out. So it helps me learn more about myself, really.
Yeah. It sounds like such a relief. And do you ever consider your art activism?
No. Simple answer, no. I think what the world is doing with my work perhaps is activism in a way. Like I said, I'm doing it for myself. I'm doing it to understand myself better and really get more in touch with my beliefs and my moral compass. And what people do with my art afterwards is up to them. But what I do love is that my poem at least is bringing up conversations that need to be had between people I don't know, and even between myself and people I care about. It's kind of opened the doors. I wrote a pretty pretty out there, blunt poem, and you can't ignore that. Like, people who I know personally, like, they can't ignore that they heard the poem.
Mm.
Now they know a little bit of what I think. So
Mm. And would you say that the reward of this year has been writing your book?
the reward for me this year is what writing all these poems have done for me on a spiritual level. But I mean, the book is a definitely a cherry on top, because I never really planned in my life to write a book. I never thought I was that kind of person who would ever publish a book. It was just not in the cards for Kayla. But I went with the opportunities, and I went with the flow. And I think the more you follow your gut and your compass, the more synchronicities kind of fall into place. So it's beautiful for me to see, like, that I was able to write a book. I didn't think that was something I could do.
Yeah, you did it. I absolutely love it. I even love like just the feel of it and the size of it and the line drawings. It's like a good companion to my constant stream of news and information, because like I can tell you're in a similar headspace as me, but then you also like
Yeah.
help me escape back to my poet self and my love of
Right.
story and metaphor. So I'm very grateful that you wrote it.
Me too. Me too.
Mm. Well, do you think that you've experienced any of the latter stages of the hero's journey, like returning to the old world in some sense, or of resurrection or resolution?
Yeah, I mean, the returning to the old world is happening, though I'm still learning and understanding, which is something that's never going to end. I will always be learning and reshaping the way I'm thinking, and I'm actually looking forward to that. Um, but definitely going into this new world with a new perspective is refreshing, because I'm thinking, now that I have a better idea of what's going on, now I can live my life in a better way. Now I can be less reliant, and I'm learning tricks to be less reliant on a system that's built to fail me. And that's very comforting.
It is, yeah. Are you able to envision a new world?
At this stage, no. Not a full world, but my small portion of the world, I can envision that.
Hmm. What does that feel like when you envision your own part of a new world?
Oh, it's peace. It's absolute peaceful, filled with love, filled with life. I see myself on a farm. I see children who have never been exposed to, well, not necessarily exposed, but who I see through the eyes of a child, in a way where you're looking at everything and it's brand new. And there's no prior judgment on anything, and no prior idea of what you're supposed to be, because you're not looking outward for that. It's all in here.
Mm, that sounds incredible.
Feels incredible. I mean, I've never really articulated it, but it's very peaceful.
Yeah. Well, thank you for coming on today. I would love for anyone who's watching to be able to find you and perhaps buy your book if they're interested. Where can people
Yeah.
find you online?
So on Instagram, I'm recently on TikTok. It's at the Kayla Henry. And my website is kaylahenryonline.com. And you can find my book there. And you could just easily do an internet search, find Kayla Henry Parrhesia or Kayla Henry rhymes to rhetoric. That's the name of the book. So
Great. All right, well, let's stay in touch. I've really enjoyed our conversation today, and I really
that was
appreciate what you're
wonderful.
doing. Yeah.
Ah,
Yeah.
thank you
All
so
right.
much for having me.
My pleasure. Take care, Kayla.
You too.
Bye.